Today's workshop is Providing a Free, Appropriate Public Education During Staffing Shortages. I'm excited to introduce you to Cassie Santo, State Director of Special Education at the Vermont Agency of Education. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thanks, Karen. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this workshop, and thank you so much for being here today. My name is Cassie Santo, and I am here today to discuss the topic of providing a free, appropriate public education during staffing shortages. I also have Anna Russo joining us on this call. She is a member of the special education team at the AOE. She's waving at you right now. If a person named Anna is responding to you in the chat, it is she, and she is an expert on several of these topics. So we're very happy to have her here today. Next slide, please. There are several topics that we are going to work through today, starting with some staffing shortage data. We will then do an overview of guidance released by the Agency of Education in May of 2025. And that guidance outlines district responsibilities for providing a free, appropriate public education, or FAPE, during staffing shortages. We will review additional resources to support families, other ways to engage, and then we will allow time for additional questions. There were a couple questions submitted prior to today, so we will address those at the end, and I think some of those questions will be answered throughout the presentation as well. Additionally, throughout this hour, I do have a couple moments where I will pause to check in to see if there are any questions. So as we go, Karen already named this, but as we're going, feel free to put things in the chat and we will review those at our pauses. Next slide, please. So we're going to start with reviewing available data related to staffing shortages of special education personnel in the state of Vermont. Next slide. We're going to begin with this image from July of 2023. And this image shows states' progress toward returning to pre-pandemic staffing levels. So the map reflects the progress of each state in returning to staffing levels before the pandemic in local public education employment. It displays the percent change in total local public education jobs in each state relative to pre-pandemic staffing levels in that state. So a positive number on this map indicates that local education employment exceeds its pre-pandemic level in that state, while a negative number would be reflecting how depleted local education employment is relative to the pre-pandemic period. So we are 9.6% below pre-pandemic levels. There are other factors weighted here. It's adjusted for child population change and student enrollment, but I did want to center us today with this reality that we are only behind Alaska. So in relation to all other states, we are second in regards to how far away we are from returning to pre-pandemic staffing levels. This was July 2023. It is a bit outdated, but I think still very relevant. Next slide, please. This graph is Vermont specific, and it represents the trend and number of provisional and emergency teaching licenses granted over time across disciplines. So this is going to be inclusive of special education teachers, of math teachers, art teachers, all disciplines who are on provisional or emergency licenses. So you'll notice in the early years on this graph, which is representative of school year 2017 and really leading into 2021, those numbers hover and increase at a relatively stable point. So it's 433 in that first data point with 2017. We have a steady increase. And then in 2021, we really see a big spike. We go from 523 folks on non-traditional teaching licenses to 675 in school year 2022 to 795 in 2024. So you will notice that it has started to decline again, but nowhere near the numbers we had only 5 years ago. This graph and this information could suggest that there is a growing struggle to staff classrooms with traditionally licensed teachers, and that many LEAs are increasingly relying on individuals who haven't completed standard preparation programs or who need to receive a provisional or an emergency license to fill immediate gaps. Next slide. So this table represents provisional licensure data broken out by discipline, and this is for the most recent school year. This was as of April 1st, 2025. There were a combined total of 568 provisional licenses and 141 emergency endorsements. And then additionally, there are 48 pending applications. There is not an option for an emergency endorsement in special education, only a provisional endorsement. So that's why you will notice that special education is only represented on the left side of this table. Teachers pursuing special education have to have a clear pathway to full certification. So emergency licenses are not an option, and that is an OSEP standpoint. Still, you'll notice that last year, 100 of the provisionals issued was for special education teachers, and it's higher than any other discipline, even when combining disciplines across the two types of licenses. Next slide. This last graph that we're going to look at is titled Special Education Full-Time Equivalent. And it is a combination of some of the data we just reviewed. It's illustrating two key trends here related to special education staffing over a period of school years. So we're looking at school year 2018 to school year 2023. Again, in Vermont, FTE stands for full-time equivalent, and that's a measure of the number of full-time positions. So our y-axis on this graph represents the number of those positions across our state, and it's with a range of 1,100 to 1,400. And then that x-axis, that bottom axis, is representing the school years. So what the top line, that slightly darker green line, is it represents the total FTE positions. So it's the total number of special education positions throughout our state over the years. That lighter green line is representing professionally licensed special education teachers. So that is the number of special education positions filled in our state by professionally licensed individuals. So you'll notice the dark green line shows a general trend upward, starting around 1,260 in school year 2018. It dips slightly, but then we're consistently seeing a rise, indicating a growing need or expansion in special education services and positions in Vermont schools over this time period. And then again, in contrast, that lighter green line, or professionally licensed, is showing a downward trend, particularly from school year 2021 onward, which, if you remember, that's when we really saw the spike in provisional licenses. And then it's continuing to drop significantly into school year 2023. I think the most critical insight from this graph is that increasing gap between the total full-time equivalent positions across our state and then the professionally licensed employees, especially in the later years. It does imply that while the demand for special education staff is increasing, the ability to fill these positions with professionally licensed individuals is decreasing. Next slide, please. So looking at all that data can be a bit jarring at first, and you might consider that Vermont is not the only state impacted by these shortages. And so in response to that, OSEP, the Office of Special Education Programs, has a technical assistance center known as CEDAR. It's the Collaboration for Effective Educator Development, Accountability, and Reform. We have been a CEDAR partner since 2020. Jackie Kelleher, who was the former director of special education back in the COVID era, she spearheaded much of this work, brought me into the fold in 2022. This is a group of dedicated Vermont education professionals working to improve the preparation of teachers and leaders to serve students with disabilities. This team includes representatives from local education agencies across our state, people from educator prep programs, so UVM, St. Mike's, every college across the state is represented, parent and family advocates, the Agency of Education, and other local organizations. And we receive ongoing support from the CEDAR Center. The goals of this group are really focused on developing a range of licensure pathways. We've worked a lot in the past couple of years talking about licensure pathways for paraeducators, to address the special education personnel needs at the district level. We also work to track and evaluate the impact of mentoring. This group supported the development of a mentoring program that we created specific to special education teachers and people pursuing a provisional license. And then we also identify and disseminate resources available to special educators who are seeking pathways to licensure. There is a link on this slide to learn more about this work. And before we transition into our next segment, I just wanted to pause here for a moment. I'll have you go to the next slide, Rachel. And this is our first opportunity to just check in if there are any questions coming in through the chat, or if folks want to raise their virtual hand. So I'll go to Anna first if there's anything coming through the chat that we want to respond to.
Yeah, nothing in the chat so far.
Okay.
So let me just ask a question. So
Yeah.
why do the folks at the Agency of Education think that we seem to be experiencing more of a gap in comparison to the other states, except for Alaska? That seems as if that gap is one of the worst ones.
Yeah, I think it's multifaceted, Karen, and I'm not going to have a direct answer. There is some data from the COVID, when CEDAR was first working with our state, there is some data from special education teachers in the field about common concerns and things that were causing them to leave the field. So there was a survey conducted at that time, and I'm not going to do it justice because I don't have it in front of me, but some of the top reasons, were paperwork burden, role ambiguity, some of the things that we hear as really common reasons that special education teachers leave the field. But I also think in our state, we have a lot of factors here that are impacting this. We have a housing crisis. I worked as a teacher in our state for 4 years. It was a struggle to survive economically on that salary. So I think there's a lot at play here that impacts. And then why is it so pronounced in Vermont is a great question, Karen, and something that our group at CEDAR has definitely been focused on over the years. Why is it so pronounced, but also how do we fill the gap? Because it results in students sometimes not getting services that they need in order to access their education, which is part of the impetus of this training. But that's a great question, Karen, and I wish I had some more hard data to actually give you the concrete answer, but it doesn't exist. Any other questions, guys? Hey, Rachel, I'll have you go to the next slide, but folks, again, feel free to put things in the chat as we're going. So, this is, again, probably needless to say, but we as a state, as an agency, as a team of folks on the special education team, and a lot of us, I think, consider ourselves advocates as well, we've noticed these trends over the years, and we also know that they directly impact the delivery of services. So I'm going to review the guidance that the agency released on providing free, appropriate public education during staffing shortages. It's going to take about 10 to 12 minutes to review this guidance, and then we will pause again for questions. Next slide. Okay, so this guidance was initiated in January 2025. Disability Law Project, jointly with Vermont Family Network, wrote to the AOE to request that the AOE exercise its general supervisory authority and issue guidance to all LEAs regarding the rights of qualified students under the IDEA. This work took several months. Special education team members met with VFN, we met with Vermont Legal Aid, and we also met with the Vermont Council for Special Education Administrators, or VCSEA, several times to develop this guidance. And in collaboration, a final document was created and published in May of 2025. So this document went through several iterations before landing on a final place. And our hope with this is that it can ground schools and families in the complexities of this topic, and then also provide some tangible advice for how to move forward if this is a circumstance that is impacting you and your family. So next slide, please. The guidance is designed to support supervisory unions and districts, as well as parents and families. So it is for two audiences, and it is centered in making equitable and individualized decisions about special education and related services for students when facing shortages of special education staff. So although the IDEA requires that districts implement services as outlined in the IEP, missed services does not always result in a denial of FAPE if the overall IEP is still appropriately designed and the student or child is still making meaningful progress. And so what does that mean? Yes, schools are legally required by IDEA to follow a student's special education programming, which is their IEP. But missing a specific service does not automatically mean that the student is not getting a proper education. And the bigger picture here when talking about this topic is whether the student's overall programming is still appropriate for their needs and if they are continuing to make real and meaningful progress. Next slide. So districts have very specific responsibilities when facing staffing shortages. This next one, it's important to note that what I'm going to share next, it's not explicitly mandated by IDEA. So SUs and SDs, supervisory unions and school districts, they should document any instance in which students or children do not receive services as a result of staffing shortages, as a result of other duties that are happening at school. If there's instances where a student is missing services, the best practice would be for districts to be documenting those circumstances and then, when appropriate, discussing the potential lack of progress on goals due to missed services. We are really recommending with LEAs that they be transparent with families when facing staffing shortages that have the potential to impact their child's progress. So if this is coming up on this new school year, we would anticipate that if LEAs are being impacted by staffing shortages, that they're arranging IEP meetings with families to collaborate and share concerns about any potential changes that will impact their child so that they can make a plan to address progress concerns. But it's again important to note that incomplete implementation of IEP services is not necessarily considered a denial of FAPE. There are other layers to that type of consideration. A child's IEP is a detailed plan, and it's designed to meet their unique learning needs. And while it's of course crucial for all parts of the plan to be implemented, there are going to be situations where a slight delay or a difference in how a service is delivered does not fundamentally prevent the student from making progress. However, if you learn that significant parts of the IEP are not being implemented, or even with services being implemented, if you see that your child isn't making progress in any of these circumstances, then it should be a concern about whether they are truly receiving FAPE. And that is the ultimate question that's being answered in these conversations. If the student has continued to make appropriate progress as outlined in their IEP, so making progress on those IEP goals, making progress within the general education curriculum, despite having missed some services, there are circumstances where additional services might not be necessary, or they might focus on very specific impacted areas. Next slide. So how do teams determine if there has been a denial of FAPE? Decisions about services designed to address the lack of FAPE, those decisions are based on the educational impact on the student or child. It requires an analysis of the particular facts related to the student or child. And then it's based on credible and reliable data, as well as the individual circumstances of the student or child. Decisions about how to make up for times when your child hasn't received their full educational rights, it's not just made with a blanket rule. Instead, the school team has to really look at how did this circumstance actually affect the child's learning, which means that they're considering the specific details of a student's situation. They're really looking at each case individually. So this consideration is going to include data based on measurements set forth in the IEP, that documentation of the extent of missed services, and then any other data relevant to the impact on the student's progress toward IEP goals and other progress within the general education curriculum. So this decision, again, is specific to the child. So you could imagine that we have two students in the same school who missed the same exact amount of speech therapy sessions due to an absence of their SLP. One student was making steady progress anyways, and the missed sessions did not seem to hinder that student's progress. However, another student, those missed services had a significant impact on that student's accessibility to certain social occurrences and other things within the general education classroom. So the school team would have to consider each child's unique situation differently, and what might be a significant impact for one child, it could be less so for another. If services cannot be provided as written in a student or child's IEP due to a staffing shortage, then the IEP team has to determine how to continue to provide FAPE to the student or child. IEP teams should be meeting to determine appropriate decisions about services designed to address the lack of FAPE, if progress has been impacted, and then explore alternative ways to deliver the necessary services. Any adjustments to service delivery due to staffing shortages must still aim to facilitate the student's progress, right? It's to help close those gaps and to facilitate any progress that might have been lost from that staffing shortage. The bottom line is that even if there's a staffing issue, the school has to try their best to ensure that your child is making progress. And so any changes they make to services have to be aimed at ensuring that the child continues to learn and move forward towards their IEP goals and any academic goals that within the general classroom curriculum. Next slide. There is no universal formula for determining the type, frequency, and duration of services to be provided to a student or child who did not receive appropriate services. Again, that focus should be on the impact on the student's progress, tailored to their unique needs. Additional services are made in agreement with the LEA. They're based on necessity, and they could include additional special education and related services, small group or individual tutoring, or additional academic or enrichment services, but that list is non-exhaustive, and there are other ways that districts might go about this. Ongoing collaboration with parents and families is required when determining how to provide the services necessary to ensure FAPE. So if you're experiencing this, your district should be communicating this circumstance with you and working collaboratively to develop solutions. It's essential that IEP teams consider whether additional services may be needed in circumstances where specific skills show signs of impact caused by missed services. So if this circumstance is impacting your child and your district is not working with your family to ensure that plans are in place, we do encourage you to reach out to the special education team, and Anna can drop that email in the chat so you all have it. And we encourage you to reach out for additional support, because without knowing the scope, there is not much we can do. So it's important to let us know. Next slide. These are some sample questions that parents and school teams might use to support this discussion. We very much tried to pare this down to only a few questions so that it would not be overwhelming, but hopefully help to lead teams in their discussions about this topic. So some questions you might consider: what services in the student or child's IEP were not received? What does data collected through progress monitoring, progress reports, report cards, classwork, informal and formal assessments, and screening, what does all that data show about the student or child's progress toward IEP annual goals and in the general education curriculum? And then what information is available from previous school years about the student or child's ability to recoup lost skills or make effective progress after extended breaks in instruction? And what would be the most appropriate and effective way to make up for lost skills and address gaps? Next slide. I definitely saw some questions coming through in the chat this time, so I think this is probably a good opportunity to pause.
See, we did have one come in the chat. Okay. So Elizabeth was asking, are there mechanisms for looking at conflict of interest when determining whether there has been a denial of FAPE? And Elizabeth, if you are able to unmute and maybe expand on your question.
Sure. Hi, good afternoon. So I guess what I'm thinking about is in cases where you're trying to determine, where a team is trying to determine denial of FAPE, that seems to be a dicey prospect to me. Like, in order to really get at the truth of something, some people are maybe gonna feel bad about or not be doing a good job. And I'm just wondering if there is a mechanism for looking at potential conflicts of interest there. Does that make sense?
Not in a place where I feel confident answering it. I think what you're asking is if there's, like, are you meaning like within the IEP team conflicts of interest?
Yeah. Maybe I don't know enough about this topic to be asking the question that I'm asking. And if that is the case, I'm apologetic, but
Oh, no, you're good. I'm glad you're asking, and we might be able to, yeah.
I'm coming at this from the position of being a parent who's starting at the beginning and trying to learn about this. But you know, if you're a team and the child is not getting the services that they need, is that team, they have to take a look at themselves. you know, and are they able to do that clearly? Or is there a conflict of interest at the heart of having the team be who is determining a denial of FAPE?
I wouldn't know. It would, you know, we're really nestling into what is IDEA's practices around some of this. And so if it weren't the team using the expertise about the child to have that conversation, I would not be clear on who else would be the person having that conversation. And the hope is that the team is able to come together. And then if a team is not able to come together, there are formal methods for disagreeing with the IEP team. And then if that's the case, that might be the avenue folks choose to go. But I think ultimately we really urge folks to come back to their team to have these conversations. Sorry, and I'm sorry if I'm not answering it fully.
No, I appreciate your input. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so oh, okay, I thought I saw something in chat. So Elizabeth, the parent is a part of the IEP team. So that is when the parent does get to have a say as to whether or not they agree with whether or not there is a loss of FAPE. So I think an IEP team is always made up of different interests, but the reason why the parent is a member of the IEP team is that you are there for your child, and the others at the table are there with their expertise. So there's always going to be a little conflict within an IEP team, or not always, but in certain circumstances there will be conflict because there will be a difference of opinion. So I'm not sure whether that gets to the answer. And then again, yes, you can engage in dispute resolution. There are several places that you can go to formally disagree with the school if the team does remain in disagreement. But when the team itself is meeting and there is disagreement, the school does get to make that decision at the time, but then the parent can engage in dispute resolution.
Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. And then Sarah wrote, can you share the last question from the previous slide? And Cassie put in those questions for folks in the chat if you want to grab them and put them off. And that's it, Cassie.
Yeah. Thank you. And this is linked in the slide deck. We also could, we can drop a link directly to the guidance in the chat. I know Anna can probably do that while I'm talking through this next segment. And that's going to have those questions, and it also is the full guidance document. I'm just doing an overview here, so there's certain parts of it that might not be included in this presentation. So I would definitely urge folks to go to the actual guidance. And maybe Karen, I don't know if we do a follow-up email after, I can make sure to attach that separately so you don't have to go into the PowerPoint to find it. I'll keep that in mind for the future. Okay, next slide, please. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit now and share with you all some of the AOE created resources that exist and are available for families. Next slide. So family engagement strategies are critically important to student success. And this is probably not going to come as a surprise to this group, but research shows that strong, consistent strategies for family engagement has improved outcomes for students. It also shows higher staff satisfaction and better teacher retention rates. So those partnerships are so important. The Family Engagement Toolkit provides research-based information, proven strategies, a self-assessment to reflect on practice, and then links to additional tools that can be customized to the specific district or school. The toolkit is really meant for districts. It was created as part of the state systemic improvement plan, but I'm sharing this with you all because a parent might utilize this resource for several reasons. And particularly if you're wanting to engage with your child's school community or advocate for broader improvements. So I think that this toolkit could really give parents a better understanding of what are the best practices and self-assessment criteria that schools are supposed to be using for family engagement. This would give families some insight into the school's framework and their goals for involving families. And individual schools might have even more details about their family engagement strategies on their website, but this is the state issued guidance on that topic. This toolkit might help parents to facilitate constructive dialogue. So if you're feeling that communication or involvement is lacking, you might reference sections of this toolkit during conversations. And by understanding these guidelines, it might help to frame suggestions or concerns in a way that aligns with the school's own language around family engagement. This could be beneficial for participation in school committees. So parents are part of school improvement teams, parent-teacher organizations, special education advisory committees. It can serve as a common framework for those discussions to help committees to assess practices, identify gaps, and then propose new initiatives related to family engagement. As a reference for advocacy, you could use this document to advocate for systemic changes or specific needs. There's a lot of recommendations within this toolkit to support specific improvements in how schools engage with families. And just in essence, a parent might use this to better understand, evaluate, and contribute to the family engagement efforts within your child's school. Next slide. So in addition to the toolkit, we have some role-specific guidance. I want to name, Karen was sort of addressing this earlier, and I think this is a really important thing to name. Family engagement is a cornerstone and an explicit legal mandate within the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. In contrast, this level of individualized, legally enforceable engagement is unique to IDEA. When we look at other major educational legislation like the Every Student Succeeds Act, they strongly emphasize and promote parent and family engagement, but it does so more at a programmatic and systemic level rather than at an individualized mandated one. And when you're considering IDEA, it requires states and schools to ensure parental participation in all key decisions regarding a child's special education. So you are a team member in every conversation, evaluation, identification, IEP development, and placement. Parents aren't just involved, they are legally recognized as equal members of the team with rights to notice, consent, and then due process. And yeah, that level of individualized legally enforceable engagement is unique to IDEA. So this particular resource that's linked on this slide provides strategies for individualized education program team members to consider to develop a more comprehensive approach to family engagement for families of children with disabilities. And again, this is designed to support districts, but for all of the same reasons that you might lean on the toolkit, you might lean on this tool as well. If you're going to an IEP meeting or, as Elizabeth mentioned, feeling kind of new to going to some of these meetings, this might be guidance to review to help prepare you for those meetings, knowing that this is the guidance that districts have from us as the state agency to support those conversations. So hopefully another beneficial resource just in grounding yourself in some of the practices. Next slide. So this is the last little segment here before we'll pause again for questions. There are other ways to make your voice heard. There are other ways to engage both with the AOE and with your local district, and also with ongoing educational initiatives. Next slide. So firstly, the agency sends out a special education parent involvement survey. We as a state agency are required to measure several indicators. And indicator 8 specifically measures the percentage of parents with a child receiving special education services who report that the school facilitated parent involvement as a means of improving services and results for children with disabilities. That was a mouthful, but essentially this indicator is about how well are parents engaged in their child's special education journey. It is one of many indicators that we report on in an annual performance report that is submitted to the government, and it's to measure the status of parent involvement in special education. So this survey is distributed to all parents in Vermont who have children receiving special education services. And this data can be used to inform system improvement planning efforts at the local and state level because it demonstrates the strengths and potential areas in need of improvement with respect to best practices for involving parents in special education. You will notice there is an email on this slide. anyone can request data on their district's parent involvement survey responses. So there are several ways to request this info, and one of the simplest ways is to email Caitlin Chisholm. She's our state systemic improvement coordinator. She's the main contact for Indicator 8, which is this survey, and she can lead you in the right direction if you want to see those results for your district. Next slide. This is a breakdown of the parent involvement survey response rate. So almost 16,000 surveys were mailed directly to parents. 1,388 parents returned the survey, almost all of them by mail. And so out of all the surveys sent out, a total of 9% of recipients responded to the survey. Just for context, the survey asked participants 17 questions about their involvement, and they're given 4 options to measure how they experience those things. So the 4 options are never, sometimes, often, or always. And we measure positive response rate by calculating the % of parents who respond either always or often to all 17 statements that they're given. We also ask if parents were made aware of the parent involvement survey before receiving it, and 70% of parents have reported no prior knowledge of the survey. 20% of parents reported being previously made aware of the survey, and then 10% of parents had no response to this question. Next slide. So the parent involvement survey is attempting to measure all the components listed on this slide. When you take the time to complete this survey, you are directly contributing to a clearer picture of parent engagement across the state. This helps us at the state level understand the real world experiences of families, and it can ultimately help us to identify trends, right? So are there common themes emerging across Vermont regarding parent-school partnerships? This survey allows us to develop targeted resources, training, and support for schools to better meet families' needs. And we're really trying to increase the prior knowledge of this survey and therefore our response rate. So please look for this survey. And Anna plays a big role in distributing this survey. So I was gonna see if Anna wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, I just want to let folks know that they, if you had a student with an active IEP in school year 24-25, you will be receiving this survey in August. And it does have the green state of Vermont logo, much like the DMV. So you'll see that on the envelope, top left, moon over mountains in our Vermonty green. So that will be the survey for this year.
I don't know if you noticed Christine's question. Is it coming via email? Or does it just come in the mail?
Oh, there it goes. So it comes via mail, but there are multiple ways for folks to respond. There is a QR code that folks can respond in English or other languages. There is a phone number in which if you need to call and you can respond to the survey through those means, or you can do the business reply mail that comes within that envelope as well. We currently don't have a means of collecting parent emails for the entire state at the moment, but something we do consider.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Anna, who actually administers the survey?
We have a vendor called ANLAR that collects the survey for us. But everything is on Vermont letterhead. I don't think parents will see an ANLAR logo on anything. It's just our person that does a lot of the logistics for us.
Thanks, Anna.
Mm-hmm.
We'll go to the next slide, Rachel. In addition to the survey as a direct way to engage, Vermont also has a very active special education advisory panel. So per IDEA, each state is required to establish and to maintain an advisory panel for the purpose of advising the state special education staff regarding the education of eligible children with disabilities. The responsibilities of this advisory panel are defined on this slide, and this is all part of the legislation. They are tasked with advising the state on unmet needs in the education of children with disabilities. They are tasked with commenting on any rules and regulations proposed by the state regarding the education of children with disabilities, advising the state in developing evaluations and reporting on data as required by federal special education laws, advising the state in developing corrective action plans for the U.S. Department of Education, and advising the state in developing and implementing policies related to the coordination of services for children with disabilities. Next slide. There are 37 members. The majority of members are individuals with disabilities or parents of children with disabilities, and members serve a 3-year term. We are always seeking new members. This is just another way to engage. The meetings are monthly. They're open to the public. I linked the application form here. And then this is another area of expertise for Anna. She's been working with the panel for years now. Is there anything you would want to add?
Yeah, I put the link for our panel's webpage on the chat here. Our first meeting of the full panel is September 2nd of 2025. So that is coming up. And that is in the evening from 4:30 to 7:30. And it is through virtual, it's through Microsoft Teams. So folks
and actually, Rachel, will you go to the next slide? I have the meetings listed.
Oh, perfect. So yeah, the next one is September 2nd. We do have, I believe, 2 in-person ones. The one in May is also in person, and that's usually at National Life, which is in Montpelier. But all the other meetings, folks can join virtually, just like you're joining this meeting.
Yes, they are open public meetings. Anyone can join. You don't have to be a member. And so it's just another way to get touch points. And Elizabeth has a great question about the survey that I don't know if you see it, Anna, but at these SEEP meetings, we often do presentations on indicator data. So there are a lot of opportunities at those meetings to learn about Elizabeth's exact question. Do you want me to read that one out loud, Anna?
I can take one piece at a time if that's okay. I don't want to run out of time for folks. So our response rate at about 8 to 9% year to year is pretty comparable to most other states. It is pretty standard, I guess, for like typical surveys in this route where we're trying to get a large population of folks. We do have a lot of goals for increasing the response rate. So one of the things that we did between last year and this year is that we're trying to make the language within the parent survey much more parent friendly. Trying to take out jargon and academia words and just trying to make sure that every parent has a way to respond to it. We've expanded our language use for the survey itself, knowing that not all families speak English. So we've done some work in the translation field as well. And then year to year, one of our goals is to have a better means of reaching out to parents. So kind of doing multiple methods with school districts, with family organizations, and then possibly some direct contact with parents. So those are our goals so far, and we would love to hear for other strategies that would be better for reaching parents. The next question I see is, are family participants with the Special Education Advisory Panel compensated? So members are compensated with a reimbursement rate. I don't know it off the top of my head, but once you are a panel member and attending meetings, there is a reimbursement for attending those meetings. And then the times for the panel meetings, they're usually in the evenings from 4:30 to 7:30, virtually through Teams. And the 2 in-person meetings, October and May, they kind of run all day, I would say, from like 9 to 3-ish, and they are in person in Montpelier. I hope I answered all the questions.
That was awesome. Thank you, Anna.
Yeah.
I will follow up with this slide deck, and I'm going to add in here the times. So Karen, I'll send you an updated slide deck because I'm realizing I didn't put the times that these are on this page. And that would be helpful. And we hope to see you guys at some of those meetings. They really are. I learned so much from the group. They're very collaborative, and we just hope to see you at some of those calls in the future. Next slide, please. So in addition to state level panels, there are also several special education parent advisory councils throughout our state. These are district level parent driven groups, and they provide input to the local school district on system level challenges in special education. And any school district can establish a local CPAC, a special education Special Education Parent Advisory Committee. And the chair of our state level panel, so the special education, the SEEP, is Katie Ballard, and she started the first CPAC in our state in the Essex Westford School District. This group is a part of the local school district, and often in these circumstances, they're entirely led by parents. Having CPACs are legally mandated in some states, not in Vermont, but Essex Westford and Katie Ballard's work on this is really an example of how a strong leader can bring this to a community. I don't have a ton of information on this topic today, but if you want more information or would want to connect with Katie, please let us know. She is the chair. She's at the SEEP meetings, and we are happy to connect you with her off this call. So feel free to drop your email in the chat or let us know if you'd want some more information on how to form a CPAC. And Elizabeth, I was actually in preparation for this presentation trying to find other CPACs across the state. So, because I would love to, this is just a dream, I'm going off script here. I'd love to someday do some kind of presentation with VFN about CPACs in Vermont, active ones, and how that startup was for districts. So thank you for sharing that. And in my search, CVSD didn't come up. So now I'm also in my brain thinking about how do I find out where all these CPACs exist in our state? Anyways, more to come. Next slide. We want to close today by just reminding everybody to reach out. That's our general email on this slide. I know Anna dropped this in the chat. VFN is an incredible support network as well. And I just rest in a place that we can only move forward in this work collaboratively. There's a lot going on in our state. Meaningful and lasting improvements in special education have to be a statewide effort, a community-wide effort, a family effort. Our team is committed to leading that work and also building partnerships with you all so that we can move forward. And Elizabeth, in my hunting, those are the only two that I found as well, was Essex Westford and Addison. I reached out to Addison, but yeah, I didn't reach out to you guys because I didn't know, but this is very helpful. Next slide. This is our final break for questions. So if you're comfortable, feel free to unmute or drop any additional questions in the chat.
So Cassie, there are a few questions that we got ahead of time.
Yeah.
I don't think you answered them all, but Rachel should be dropping the survey, our workshop survey, in the chat. Is it there yet, Rachel?
I see Keith has a hand.
So,
oh, there.
Yeah, so what we do, because to try to incentivize survey responses, we'll just give everyone like 30 seconds, and then we'll sort of move on to the questions. So if folks could just use this next 30 seconds of silence to do the survey that Rachel has dropped in the chat, would really appreciate it. Okay, thank you. Cassie, I'll go ahead and just read the couple of questions that were submitted before, and I do see Keith's hand as well. So is the absence of people staffing because we cannot find the help, or is it lack of funding?
Yeah, I mean, I hope that was answered with some of the data at the opening of the presentation that we really are lacking folks. We have folks who are going on provisional licenses and helping to fill the gap, but that does come with its own sort of nuances because they might not have the same training that other educators in the field have. And given that special education is so specialized, that impacts our world very directly. But I wouldn't attribute it to lack of funding.
Okay, then from a professional, what should we expect for children who need and require supports for special education for 3 to 5-year-olds?
Well, so yeah, the guidance specifically is written for students and children. That's sort of why we use that throughout the guidance. So the guidance that I reviewed is applicable for students age 3 to 21.
Okay, and how can school boards best support our schools as they navigate these challenges?
Yeah, I thought a lot about this one, and having not ever been a school board member and not necessarily having that expertise, I may not answer this with the depth of knowledge that it requires, but I think it's really important, just like for parents and school board members, to stay informed about all of these resources and expectations. Again, special education requires a very specific amount of expertise, and I wouldn't anticipate that all school board members have that level of expertise. But staying engaged in these conversations, understanding the resources, watching the ongoing testimony, I think as a school board member, that would be a very important thing right now, would be to stay informed so that you can navigate best supporting your schools.
Okay, so thank you. Go ahead, Keith.
Thanks all. Thanks, Cassie, everyone, for the time. It's great. I'm just curious if you go back and talk through the idea of FAPE one more time. So you had shared that missed services do not always result in the denial of FAPE, especially in the case where a child is making progress. Could you ever establish denial of FAPE in the case where progress is observed? I'm wondering about situations where families go perhaps above and beyond outside of the school to secure progress for their child, but in that context, would missed services ever result in denial of FAPE?
I would urge folks to go back to an IEP team meeting in that decision, Keith, because certainly you might see impacted progress on very specific goals. You might not see any impact on goals. Maybe the impact is more in the general education environment. When I was thinking about that SLP example, I had thought maybe the lack of progress would show up in that student's social interactions in the general environment. So I don't think you can isolate it to lack of progress only on goals, but it's lack of progress in the general curriculum too, because that IEP is intended to ensure access to that learning. So, I mean, I know it's a sort of a roundabout answer because it is so individualized, but I do certainly think there are circumstances where you could find a denial of FAPE, even if there's not progress on the IEP goals, because you might see progress impacted in other areas. But I also, Keith, would say this is an IEP team decision. We really hope that, we would really urge IEP teams to come together as much as they can to have these conversations. I hope that answers your question, but if it didn't, Keith, feel free to redirect me and ask another one. I really appreciate you all being here today.
Yep.
Thanks, Christine. Yeah, I think we face immense shortages in our state, and it impacts the state of the state greatly.
So Cassie does have a few more minutes, and Anna too, if anyone wants to ask a last question. Okay, well, if not, I know that, yes, everyone will get a copy of the slides, the presentation, as well as there's contact information for the folks at Special Education at the Agency of Education. So we have many more workshops coming up that VFN is hosting. You can find those on the homepage of our website. You can also find links to previously recorded ones. This one will be out on our website pretty soon. You can also follow us on Facebook. You can join our closed Facebook page if you are a parent. We have two closed Facebook pages, one for all parents of children with disabilities, and the other one is for parents of adults with disabilities. We also have a monthly e-news. You can check out a YouTube channel for, again, all of our recordings. We are here to help. Contact us by phone or email, and thank you everyone for attending. Thank you, Cassie and Anna from the AOE, and have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, guys.